Him's House, episode 49. My name is Jonathan Stern. I'm here as always with Patrick Lester, who goes by the name Bayside in the Him's House Discord. We're joined today by Mark, Mikhael, and Josh Fritzler of Olympia Pharmacy, a compounding pharmacy in Orlando, Florida. Mark was recently appointed to the MAHA PAC, the leading political action committee dedicated to advancing the healthcare agenda of the Trump administration. Mark is CEO of Olympia Pharmacy, and Josh is CFO of Olympia. So we're excited to talk about all of that and much more. Mark and Josh, welcome to Him's House.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great to meet you guys both, and great to be here on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
To start, can you give us a little more background on Olympia? What have historically been your top products, and how has that mix shifted with the rise of GLP-1s?
Sure.
Fantastic. So I'll start with the history of Olympia, and then I'll kind of turn it over to you, Josh, to talk through kind of our product lines and our successes from that standpoint. So I think one of the things that's really unique and great about Olympia Pharmaceuticals is we were founded by two pharmacists, and we're owned by a family of pharmacists that really have kind of made this their family culture. They really intertwine that into everything that we do from a quality standpoint. We opened our doors in 2011, even before 503B was a thing, and even before outsourcing was really well known. We started with 2,000 square feet. We now have close to 300,000 square feet of space. We have the capabilities today. Yeah, pretty impressive growth over the last 14 years. And we have the ability today to do about 150,000 vials a week. And once our new brand, Wesley Pharmaceuticals, comes online, we'll be able to do close to 500, if not a little bit over 500,000 vials a week. You know, it really is a great testament to the way that the market has expanded and really the role that we play within this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of our products. So when I started about 5 years ago. We were mostly office administration, direct to clinics. So a lot of our pre-GLP business was vein clinics, IV nutrition clinics, weight loss clinics. We do a lot in the urology space, non-sterile and sterile. So a lot of urology clinics. We've done a lot with hospitals and shortage items in the past as well. We do a lot of hormone replacement in that regard. And that was all pre-GLP. Transition towards GLP, there's a guidance the FDA released that allowed a 503B to outsource to other 503As and other pharmacies. That's where we really honed in on what we can do from a shortage perspective and just what we can do to provide the hospital systems, which was our first target. And then there was a boom in telehealth, as there was a boom with outsourcing to pharmacies, which I think really allowed telehealth to grow with the ability for pharmacies to just focus on dispensing with their expertise, and our expertise is manufacturing. So we've done a lot to really open our doors and try to work with a lot of what used to be, quote unquote, our competitors in that regard. Core business, though, was a lot of vitamins and nutrition with the IV, was a lot of Trimix and a lot of the non-sterile ED for urology, lidocaine, sodium bicarb, glycerin, and those products for vein clinics. Glutathione with our IV line, et cetera. And then we do have a lot of lipotropics and different weight loss products pre-GLP. So we were in that market. So when GLPs did come, it kind of fit the bill of what we were already doing, health and wellness, and some of those product lines.
Great. So we heard about a lot there. Let's start with GLP-1s. There's, of course, this regulatory situation that is massively uncertain. There are most favored nation negotiations ongoing, and particularly interested in what's going on potentially with Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk.
Right.
Those negotiations have fueled speculation that Big Pharma might give the administration what it wants, lower prices, in exchange for tougher enforcement on compounded GLP-1s. Would love to get your take, given that you're on the side of the compounded GLP-1s.
Sure.
Whether those are here to stay or at risk from the MFN negotiations.
So I'll start, Josh,
Sure.
if that's okay. So I think from the 503B perspective, and we've talked to our attorneys and people within the industry, we cannot see a legal pathway for GLP-1s to be compounded. There's really only two considerations to make a product in a 503B. You have to be on the bulks list or you have to be on shortage. And neither one of the GLP-1s, liraglutide is still on shortage, but semaglutide or tirzepatide, we don't have those on that. Now, I think if you flip the coin and you look at the 503A personalized market, which I think is getting a lot of attention.
Right.
And I don't want to, I know everybody wants to make it about GLP-1s, but I really want to talk about personalized medicine in general, because really that's where compounding started. One of my first jobs as a pharmacist was compounding high concentration dilaudid PCAs for patients that the commercial available concentration would not touch any of their cancer pain.
Mhm.
So when you really talk about compounding, I get worried that we just fixate on a one drug item. And it's so much more than that to the general public. It's really the ability to provide access to patients, to provide affordable drugs for patients from that standpoint. And even if you look at like the clinical trials, you see that not every patient responds specifically to the drug the exact same way.
Right.
And that's why you have to have a certain level of being able to personalize a compound for these patients to just even have the same results as everybody else. If you look, and since you brought up Eli Lilly was a pharmacist. So I don't know if people knew that, but Eli Lilly was a compounding pharmacist. That's where the roots started from that. And even to go back on a simpler note, if you look at the old Norman Rockwell picture, the painting of the pharmacist, it's an old guy that's compounding. And so you really have to be careful that we're looking at, for whatever reason, they're attacking compound as a whole, but personalized medicine, compounding are so intertwined with the healthcare journey that you can't separate those two. And I think if you do separate them, or you pull back on personalized medicine, you pull back on compounding, there's a huge segment of patients that are going to suffer. You saw everybody talked about the dismissal of the Strive case, and we know that it was dismissed based on venue or district. But if you read the comments that the judge put in the dismissal letter, talking about compounding being a godsend, he didn't have to necessarily put those comments out there, but I think he felt that it was important to really hone in that this is not an issue of GLP-1. This is an issue of affordability and access to those patients. So,
that was well put. I was going to touch more on the MFN negotiations and kind of where we stand on that and what we thought. So number one, we've been doing shortage items to make sure there's access to patients for a long time. The GLPs had a massive spotlight based on revenue, based on marketability, and then just the national hype around what it does. It's a wonder product. It's a wonder drug. But for us, the MFN negotiations kind of tied in what we wanted from the very beginning. Our two goals were patient access and affordable medication. And as a 503B, where it's the only place we manufacture GLPs, that was our goal, to fill that shortage, but also apply affordable medication. So we looked at it as soon as these came off shortage. One thing that we really saw in a very positive light was, at the very least, we are forcing branded manufacturers to offer cheaper medication. That's a huge win for compounding in general. Is there compounding for specific dosing and specific patients for specific need? Absolutely. And I think that's where the 503A really comes into play. And I think there's a viability there. Absolutely. But from a 503B perspective, it kind of matches what we want: patients access for affordable medication. Whether we can make it or not, there's going to be a slew of products that we're going to fill that void in. GLPs right now as a B is not one of those.
And Josh, I love, Josh has a great saying, and he talks about where the price point was when we entered the market. And so I'll let you kind of...
I mean, it was over $2,000 a month for a patient. Now it's looking like, in recent news, around $200. I mean, that's a massive win for patients in the US. Whether we're compounding it or not, I just think it's a huge win. Competition, I think, is relevant. If you look at Novo and you look at Nordis competing on insulin, they bettered each other and they bettered a product to compete and then eventually join. I think we kind of did the same thing in the same vein of we competed from a pure outreach perspective of what we were able to reach all the 503Bs in the country. You have no choice if you're a branded manufacturer to lower your price.
There's so much out there, so much information out there about these MFN negotiations. I don't know what's information or misinformation. There's just a ton that's swirling online.
Sure.
I've heard compounders might be at the table. I've heard others say that like this is strictly between Trump and Big Pharma, Trump and Novo, Trump and Lilly.
Yep.
Like, are you able to say if there are compounders that are sort of either at the table for these negotiations or an ancillary part of them?
I mean, I think we're in the waiting room. Like, we are definitely not at the table, but I do think our pricing, you look at all marketing from Reddit to social medias, the pricing of what GLPs are through telehealth is out there online. I think pricing for what we're able to offer different pharmacies is out there. So I think that's our sense of where we're at the table, but we're not in the negotiations and we're not able to hear what they're talking about.
But I definitely think it's a card that the administration is playing.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so when you read the executive order that came out, they talk about competition. Either you're going to lower their prices or we're going to create competition. You heard Josh say several times about competition. Well, who's best to compete on that competition than people, 503B outsourcing facilities that are held to the same standards that those manufacturers are. So I definitely, I know that there's, within the administration, there's a lot of people that are close to different compounders. There's conversations being had, but you see that undertone and that card that's there kind of, in the negotiations is if you don't lower those prices, then we'll create that competition, just like we saw in the GLP-1s to drop the prices for you.
Great. And so yesterday there was this meeting in the Oval. Dr. Oz was there. Trump said, if the prices don't get down to $150, we have other options. Is it fair to say that like one of those other options is 503B?
I think it has to be. I 100% agree. That's the only manufacturers I think that can keep up with the demand and actually make a dent. And I think if you look at the branded manufacturers, I think they're more worried about B's making it than they are A's making it. With the new USP regulations on the batch sizes and what an A is able to produce at once, I think a B is the only one who can really fill that void where you'd feel it.
We're definitely, I think, the ace in the hole in the negotiations.
Yeah.
Maybe we feel a little bit used and that's okay. And maybe it comes to fruition. I don't know.
Who knew Dr. Wizard of Oz was on our side?
Yeah, you might feel used, although if this pathway to compounding via 503B opens up, I think you guys would be very happy.
I don't think that we would be too upset. But I think at the end of the day, and this is where I know that we've, as a company, said, and Josh has said several times on several interviews and even today, if the end result was that product comes down and we create that down, then we move on to the next item, the next affordable, the next shortage.
Yeah, and at the height of GLPs, we can go a little bit, peel some of the layers back of what we manufactured. It was about 50% of what we did. So there's a huge core business of what we had prior, and there's about 10% of what we do throughout that is shortage list items now. And these items like lidocaine, epinephrine has been on shortage for a long, long time. It's been on our product list for a long, long time. So I do think there's more scrutiny when it comes to these GLPs, but there's help needed in these hospital systems and the U.S. market for drugs exponentially.
Just one more question about the MFN negotiations, and I want to turn it over to Bayside, who has questions about MAHA and some other things. But obviously, as you said, compounding via 503B is not okay right now. Might be if things go a different way. But compounding via 503A is happening, right? Via the personalized exemption. And so the question there is, are you worried that these negotiations might, if the cookie crumbles a certain way, lead to the end of 503A compounding, or do you think that is safe?
I don't know specifically. I don't have facts, but I do know the boards of pharmacy is where you're going to get a lot of your answers state by state. So some boards of pharmacies will come out and be neutral. Some will be very specific on their stance. So I think that's where the question comes in. If you're a 503A, what's your home state? What are your home state rules? What states are you shipping this product into? I do think personally, in my opinion, it would be impossible to limit the idea where you can't have specific dosing for patients with specific needs. That is a 503A's bread and butter.
And I think the courts have kind of expressed that a little bit in a lot of their comments. You have to be very careful of the unintended consequences. And so, if the manufacturers want to say personalized medicine is not okay, what does that do to the cancer patient? What does that do to the IV nutrition patient that gets a specialized formula? And so you sometimes have to understand that you have to take it all in totality, and you can't just carve out and say, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. Oh, this nobody makes money on this, so go ahead and make it. Like that's not medicine.
It would be an insane, I would say, exception to the rule of just these two branded manufacturers. An A wouldn't make it.
Yeah. And if they say that you can't do personalized medicine, then all those patients, we were in personalized medicine before GLP-1s. We make lines of different things that are tailored to patients. You see it on the dermatology line, the hormone replacement line. There's so many different things, nutrition, pain management. All of those things are personalized medicine because what's commercially available does not offer this relief to those patients. Yeah. And so you have to have that option for positive healthcare outcomes.
Yeah. But a bias cream is not nearly as sexy of a headline as a GLP personalized dose from an A, for sure.
Yeah. I keep asking about GLP-1s. I feel like one of the bank analysts on a HIMSS earnings call when the company offers dozens of other products.
Yeah,
they are these wonder drugs. They do have national attention. So
absolutely.
Want me to jump in here, Jonathan?
Yeah, jump in.
Okay. Well, I'm actually going to pull back on some of those threads. A few, they're somewhat unrelated, but they're related to what you just said. But before I do that, as we speak, it's coming up on 3:00 p.m. on Friday, October 17th. What's interesting to me, and I've been a little bit on the bearish side on some of this MFN stuff you were just talking about, but I actually interpreted what happened yesterday in the White House is somewhat bullish for compounding, because one of the things that the president said repeatedly is we have other options. And as we just said, it seems to me that compounding is potentially one of those options. And yet, as we speak, HIMSS as a stock is down 14%, which is the exact opposite of bullish. But so we'll see where things stand by the time this runs, but it just seems a little contrary. That said, let me just throw in a few things, and then I really want to get into the MAHA PAC in a moment, but I'll touch on a few things first. I'll just reaffirm what you already know, since you guys are the experts. Being able to compound on an individualized basis, I don't actually think that's in any jeopardy. But there are various tools this administration could potentially use to restrain compounding on a mass basis as opposed to very small numbers. And we may not have time to get into it, but just we've talked about it on other podcasts anyway. But one of them is adding, say, GLP-1s to the too difficult to compound list, which would not affect compounding writ large. It would just affect compounding with respect to GLP-1s. Generally, I'd say all the various experts we've had have not felt that is likely to happen. Mm-hmm. Another one is to suddenly have FDA start enforcing the 5% restriction on interstate shipments. That would affect, if they did it, all sorts of compounding stuff, not just GLP-1s. The 5% restriction is on the books in terms of law, but it has not been enforced. And I believe it's been on the books for something like 15 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. So that would be a very substantial shift. And again, I would say the guests up until now have not really felt, with maybe one exception, that is something that's likely to happen. But for me, the big variable is this administration has typically, on any number of policy issues, and I'm a lobbyist, so I know a little bit about this stuff, has been willing to push the boundaries in a way that, say, prior presidencies typically have not. So my fear has been that despite, the fact that those two particular options not looking especially likely, that if this administration got the deal they wanted from Lilly and Novo, they would say, we don't care about precedent. If this is a tool, we're going to go ahead and use it. On the other hand, what the president actually said in the Oval Office did not sound like they were getting close to a deal. And in fact, it sounded like the opposite of that, which again seems very bullish to me. And yet the price action today seems to be going the other direction. So that's a little, picture in time about where things stand today. At this moment, we'll see where things stand in a few days' time. But it's interesting, comparison, I guess, with what you just said.
Yeah.
I guess largely I'm agreeing with you. So let's one quick, and then I want to turn back to the MAHA PAC.
Sure.
Because this one's GLP related. You were kind of alluding to this in some of your remarks. So one of the interesting things about GLP-1s, regardless of what happens with GLP-1s going forward, it seems to me, and you may have even mentioned this when we previously, I think, did a pre-call for this podcast. You said, one of you, I think, said something along the lines of the patient's expectations and standards around self-injection may have been transformed by GLP-1s. And regardless of what happens with GLP-1s themselves, some of that hesitation may have been addressed simply by the fact that all of this has been happening for the past few months. Sure. And there might be downstream effects on some other things in the industry, testosterone, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that. What are the broader impacts, regardless of what happened with GLP-1s? Yeah. What are the downstream effects of this?
Yeah, let's just take this one.
Before I answer that, I think the 14% HIMSS down, I would say from a bullish perspective, for them to see an increased growth from compounding, you would have to then have the administration allow Bs. That's to me where you really see that increase, because there's A's doing it now. I don't know if the administration meeting yesterday helps any of the telehealth from a mass compounding perspective until there's actual answers for what a B can and can't do.
Yeah, fair point.
But when it comes to self-injection, there's two things that the GLPs did, regardless of patient access, regardless of allowing us to make it, was self-administration has become way more education around it. It's become way more, there's been a lot more ability to, and confidence in a patient to do that. But it also put confidence in compounded medication. So before the GLPs boomed, a lot of our sales were direct to clinics, and clinics would do the administration of a vial and an injection. GLPs boomed, telehealth boomed. Those products are going direct to a patient's home, where they're having to figure out how to draw a syringe from a vial and how to inject themselves. And they were doing it because of the results of what that drug did. And it's become so regularly known now. It's like it's not even a big deal to them to inject in their arm or their stomach. So I do think having GLPs at this massive volume, any other product like testosterone, longevity medication, even a B12 shot for yourself is way more confidence if I'm doing it. And something we joke about is we sell Trimix. It's an ED injection directly into your penis. And if we can sell a penis injection, let me tell you, if we could sell a penis injection, I can convince you guys to inject in your arm or stomach. So for if the pen works great if you're nervous about it and a brand new manufacturer, but if you couldn't get it, which you couldn't for 2 years, I think injecting yourself and drawing a syringe was very easy to teach someone, and now it's known.
I have to say, I wasn't super jazzed about the idea of doing. You didn't really help me with that comparison.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Hear me out. You were not talking penis injections, so and hundreds of people, hundreds of thousands of people are doing it. I think an arm injection or intramuscular injection or subcutaneous injection is super easy now than it used to be. And then the second thing is confidence of the manufacturer.
I can already see people making the memes for the pop.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, I never see these guys left over.
All right, let's shift to politics. I guess I'm turning to you, Mark, on this. First, congratulations on being appointed to the MAHA PAC.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I think it's been a little over a month since the appointment. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that. And so my question is, based on your experience so far, what can you tell us about what the PAC is currently trying to accomplish in Washington, D.C.? What are the other related objectives of this administration? What are you seeing out there that's interesting?
So pretty still green to the MAHA PAC board and everything like that. So still kind of getting my, my feet wet from that perspective. But, so far it's been pretty invigorating. And the one thing that I really like is, so many people try to make the MAHA board, the MAHA movement, something that's partisan. And it's really not. And if you listen to a lot of the key components, and I've had the pleasure of hearing Secretary Kennedy speak and Dr. Oz speak personally regarding some of these missions, they really don't want it to be a partisan issue. They really want it to be about giving health back to the American people. And so, they're very vocal about access, affordability, patient choice. And so a lot of those things, and I think one of the statistics that Dr. Oz brought up, and I think we hear this quite frequently, is, in the US, we typically spend 2 to 3 times more per patient than any other nation on the planet. But yet we have the most sick, our population is sicker than anywhere else. And so even from an economic standpoint, what are the alternatives that are out there? What are the non-mainstream things? We've been so conditioned as a society. You go to the physician, you go to the doctor, they write you a prescription, you take that prescription, one of your lab works goes down. But then your leg starts twitching. And then they're like, oh, well, my leg's twitching, so let me give you another pill. And now your leg stops twitching, but your hair starts falling off. So let me give you another pill. And so a lot of those things, I think, is where medicine had kind of gone in, and that really polypharmacy aspect to that. And so going back to some of those ground roots, some of the things that people had kind of pushed aside, we know that Secretary Kennedy is really big into compounding meds, and he's a big proponent of that from that standpoint. So a lot of those things that may have not been mainstream, I think allowing them to be mainstream, but monitored and really making sure that they're safe and available to the healthcare continuum, I think is something that we're really trying to push from that perspective.
Interesting. Quick a follow-up to that. My own perception, being in the DC area, and having paid attention to this administration with respect to compounding, and you guys would know as much more than I do, is that it feels like there's a little bit of mixed messages. And by that, I mean, the administration, on the one hand, I wouldn't say they're pro pharma. I don't think many people would say that. They're pro informed consent on a variety of things, including peptides, which Jonathan is going to ask about in a second. On the flip side, it's not just necessarily being anti-pharma, meaning the big companies. There's a little bit of opposition to what they would call over-medicalization. So HIMSS is sometimes kind of played, it could potentially be allies of MAHA or potentially targeted by MAHA, and certainly they've gotten some letters and things like that from the FTC. So it almost feels like, where is compounding, specifically HIMSS, related to the MAHA movement? And before you answer that question, I guess in some ways this is related to your position. So when I look at the MAHA PAC, looked at all the various folks on the board, I guess, which I guess you're one. To my knowledge, you're the only compounding pharmacy executive on the board. So what do you think? What are you going to try to get? I mean, you are the voice for the compounding industry, and to some extent within the MAHA movement, at least with respect to this PAC. How does MAHA view the compounders, and what are the areas of both alliances and potential concerns?
Yeah, so I'll start with, I will tell you, MAHA is very supportive of compounding.
Oh, that's a clear statement. That's
yeah. I was going to say, but I don't think that it's and I think you said it very eloquently in your introduction or your questioning, is sometimes they're for, sometimes they're against.
Yeah.
And it's not about being blinded by, oh well, I don't care what they do, I'm going to 100% vote for them, or I don't care what they do, I'm going to be 100% against them. And I think that's part of the shift that I'm seeing in the politics, specifically around MAHA. It's putting the patient at the middle. And so putting the patient at the middle, there are times that pharma makes sense. Putting the patient in the middle, there are times that compounding makes sense. And so it's no longer a one size fits all. And I think if you were going to probably summarize what we've said up until this point, that's where compounding is. Like we help bridge that gap when there is not a one size fits all solution from that standpoint. So, and as far as being the only compounder on the board, we're a very close industry. We've hosted other 503Bs here. We've gone and visited other 503Bs. With the GLP boom, we saw a ton of people coming in. Through OFA. I know you guys had Lee on the podcast as well. We get together on a biweekly basis and we talk about the issues within the industry. And some of these are 503Bs for veterinarians. Some of these are hospital-based. Some of these are health and wellness. But we all have a certain commonality. And I think that's where I'm able to
with the same voice. Yeah. And there's a lot of other compounders, I think, associated with MAHA. Mark's just the Florida Pharmacist of the Year. So they put him on the board.
Well, it sounds like what I heard you say is they're putting the patient first, and that really is the guiding principle as opposed to being for or against compounders.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, whatever your personal politics are, I think Republican, Democrat, Independent, you can stand behind that if you know that the decisions that are being made put the patient foremost in the center of the decision. And again, like I said, so compounding, we're not saying that compounding is the answer to everything. I don't think you've ever heard us say that, but I know we play a significant role in that continuum.
All right, I'm going to kick it back to Jonathan. I think he's got some important questions on peptide.
Great. So there's this publication, MMM Online, medical journal, medical media outlet, that came out with an article following the appointment to MAHA that said, you're most passionate about advancing the compounding of peptides. There's this quote, I think from you, Mark, you said, there's a whole class of holistic alternative peptides, whether it's BPC 157, and there's a whole list of them that you can find that have not been able to be compounded. And I think that's going to be part of the focus. As you just alluded to, we had Lee on the show a few weeks ago. One of my major concrete takeaways towards the end of that interview, he said there will be action, or he said, I think there will be action on peptides very soon.
How long ago was the interview?
The interview, yeah, the recording was had to have been 3-4 weeks ago now. Okay. Didn't ask him to give a hard timeline, but say more about peptides, whether we are going to see action on that, or at least the likelihood of something like that.
It sounds like you're having the same conversations with Lee that we're having. I am passionate about peptides, and I think it's one of those drug classes, again, that may not have fit into that big pharma. But I will tell you today, there's hundreds of thousands of patients that are taking peptides across the U.S. And they're getting them from sources that they probably should not get it from. And so, when I see the agency turn a blind eye to this, I really think it puts patients at risk. Lee has presented before the FDA several times on the safety and with data and statistics on the efficacy, but has not been able to, at this point, to get it across the line. But I think with this new administration, really focus on patient first, I think we're going to start to see a shift on that. And I think we recently saw a letter from Coach Tuberville from Alabama to Congress that was urging them to approve certain peptides to the market. I have people in my life that I know are getting peptides from alternate sources. And, they ask me and I say, what can I tell you? It's not approved. Just please be careful. So I think even having that FDA oversight for something we know that's happening, and there's not people dropping in the streets because of peptides. You don't open up the paper. I'm old. I'm dating myself. I don't know that anybody opens up the paper. Okay. I don't know if anybody opens up the paper. So, but you're not seeing headlines every single day where people are dropping in the streets from peptides. But we know that people are taking, and with great effects and positive outcomes.
Yeah, the vast majority of people who take them say that they're magical.
Yeah.
you said you're passionate about them. Why? Personally, is it, from a business standpoint?
Well, I could talk about, the GLP-1s from that standpoint. Obviously that's a different peptide, but it was life-changing for me. I was one of those people that thought I would never inject myself. I went on our compounded tirzepatide product. My lab work pre-GLPs were all over the place. The only time I was anxious about the injection was the first time I did it. After that, I never gave it a second thought. I lost 55 pounds. My A1C dropped from way above normal diabetic into a normal range. My cholesterol dropped into normal range. I came off my blood pressure medication. I came off my diabetes medication. So it was fantastic. You said it, I think, Jonathan, but some of these compounds are magical. And, I think you see that same correlation to the rest, whether it's BPC or GHK or these other peptides that are out there. People will tell you they're magical and they're life-changing. So, putting the patient first, why would you restrict access to that? Why would you restrict safe access to that?
I think that's I would say, policy that MAHA might be able to help push, would be to allow these to be compounded under an FDA registered facility that's audited for safety. There's testing that goes into before a batch and after a batch is released to allow patients to be able to have confidence and safety around it. I think that would be number one from a policy perspective with MAHA.
And just for the record, when Josh said about your personal journey, he was not talking about Trimix. That's the interject. That's the penis injection.
None of us thought that, Mark. Now we are.
Just had to set the record straight.
All right. Should I get the next question, Jonathan?
Yeah, take it away.
Okay. You mentioned newspapers a second ago. I don't think that's quite, it's not like you're listening to an old transistor radio or something like that. But I'm old enough to remember those things. I got a little bit of gray hair to show for it. And here's a category that's become of increased interest to me, and that's the longevity category. It's tossed around a bunch. We've been talking about this particular topic with a few of our guests. It's kind of at the frontier of healthcare. Is Olympia doing anything on that category? What do you see both in the immediate future and maybe down the road on that category?
Sure. Favorite question so far. We've been doing longevity since I think Olympia's been around with the IV nutrition. A lot of it was built for IVs or intramuscular. Since then, a lot of them are now subcutaneous, very similar to how you inject a GLP. And we do a slew of products, whether it's B12, whether it's glutathione, whether it's Somorelin, NAD, anti-aging products that you would just inject just like a GLP. I would consider the next wave of what I think telehealth will take on. GLPs is weight loss centric, and I think those aren't going away. I don't think weight loss and telehealth, whether it's lipotropics or GLPs, is going anywhere. But I do think as you move towards, if you look at what telehealth is doing on testosterone and hormone replacement and lab work, I think the next step would be lab work to your B vitamins are low. Here's B12, NAD for brain fog and anti-aging. I think all of these fit that same mold. And I do think that would be your next level of what you can do at home and what patients can do in the comfort of their house, speaking to their doctor. A lot of these products are safe. Well, they're all safe, but a lot of them are safe to inject yourself. In a sense of education is not very strict. There's not a whole lot to it other than subcutaneous injection, follow your clinical dosing. And I think it's going to change a lot of people's lives.
Are you seeing any metrics that would sort of underlie or give a sense of what the demand and interest is? I mean, I can see why people will be interested. I certainly am. But is there anything out there that shows what the level of demand might be?
Yeah, so I guess we've been doing this product for a long time, 90% to clinics. We've seen probably a 40 to 50% growth in our partnerships with pharmacies ordering this product. And that is a tall tale kicker of, okay, these are now going scripts direct to patient if we're outsourcing them to a 503A. So that number has increased exponentially. NAD was our biggest seller to clinics for IV infusions, and now people are injecting them at homes. We do more NAD than we do anything else to pharmacies. Somorelin is another one. Glutathione is really, really popular. And I mean, Olympia has specific blends for specific needs. So we have a Trimune shot, for example, that has zinc, glutathione, and ascorbic acid for boosting your immune system. We joke around that it's the flu shot of no flu shot. So we do a lot of different blends that we know will help people, and longevity has been something we've been passionate about for a long time. So to see telehealth pick it up is really, really cool.
Just quickly, because maybe I missed it. You said 40 to 50% increase. What was that applicable, and 40 or 50% over what period of time? A year?
Yeah. So I would say since March of this year, we've really started talking to our partner pharmacies and telehealth clients about longevity and about the next wave of what we think patients can do themselves and at home with the confidence we've built around self-injection and compounded medication. Doing this in your home is very doable. So 40 to 50% increased sales of these products in general. Most of that increase is coming to sales directly to pharmacy partners we have.
And 40 or 50% since like March? Since when?
Since March.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my answer. All right. Jonathan.
I would tell you the American population, we've seen the Disney Timeless or Limitless with Chris Hemsworth and Dr. Ataya. We were at a conference last year where Dr. Ataya spoke on longevity, and he did a book signing. I've never seen a line so long. Now, it may have been the right crowd for that, but that crowd for his book signing wrapped around the exhibit hall like twice.
Yeah. And unless it's a hot dog stand, Mark's not going in line. But I mean, any other questions on longevity, we'd love to kind of dive into. We do think it's, other than GLPs, it's going to be the forefront of a lot of telehealth and a lot of patients for a long time. But other alternatives to help their lives be healthier, I think is huge. I also think telehealth for ED has been such a big thing for a long time. That's where Hims and Roe, I think, got a huge part of their start, was both hair loss, but also ED. And there's injections like we talked about. I won't go into specifics again, but those are also other areas. If you can inject yourself, there's so many alternatives to oral consumption medication.
Sounds like I might need to get over my fear of needles. Jonathan.
I'm telling you, it only takes one. The first time you do it, and you're like, I can't even believe that I was worried about that.
That's great.
And because they're subcutaneous, everyone's doing GLP subcutaneous. It's really simple from an education perspective.
All right.
I guess my question around longevity, because I hear this word tossed around and it feels like different people are referring to different things. I generally hear about two things. One is peptides, which we've discussed.
Right.
And the second is these diagnostic tests by function or superpower. Our former guest, Saad Alam, runs Hone Health. They have diagnostic tests along 65 biomarkers. HIMSS, of course, is going to be rolling out at-home lab testing to tell all of us about our hundreds of biomarkers.
Yeah.
Besides these two pillars, right, peptides on the one hand and diagnostic testing to get ahead of God knows what is coming, is there anything else that should be on our radar in the longevity space? And what does it mean to you guys? Is it extending the health span? Is it something else?
Boosting your immune system is one that has nothing to do with labs to me. So whether that's amino blends or a slew of amino acids into one cocktail of a vial where you'd inject yourself, I think the Trimune, like I mentioned, with ascorbic acid, I think energy levels from B vitamins. So we have a mineral blend that has pyridoxine, B12. There's a lot of riboflavin, a lot of B vitamins concentrated. Some of it is attributed to weight loss to boost your metabolism, but it's also to boost your overall energy. I think NAD from a brain fog and a mental fatigue has nothing to do with your lab work. It's more based on how you feel. And there's clinical pharmacists that we have in-house that can help you kind of understand what it would do and how much you should take as a recommended dosing. There's a lot other than just lab work specific. I think lab work specific to me is tailored more for hormones and testosterone and what that does to your body than it would be vitamins. I mean, people take a multivitamin every single day. They have no idea what their vitamin levels are. Glutathione, I don't necessarily think you need a test to be able to take glutathione and feel better every single day.
I think longevity is two pillars, like you were talking about, is it's not just extending life, but it's also increasing quality of life.
Amen.
Yeah. And so, like to Josh's point, it's like, to be 50, 60 years old, 70 years old, you see these people that are on a lot of these longevity products. They're not sitting at home watching, just game shows or soap operas. I mean, they're out surfing and
reading the newspaper.
Yeah.
With that, I mean, you can have high doses of ascorbic acid to help joint repair and to help inflammation. There's a slew of things that we call longevity. To Mark's point, just helps your quality of life, and that can be sexual health, and that could be just overall day-to-day performance. With Simorlin would be a phenomenal one to take. And then all the peptides we talked about in MAHA, like BPC for joint repair, does wonders for athletes, but as well as older people with fatigue. I have psoriasis, so I have to take a shot every 3 months, and my joints are killing me at all times because that's a natural progression of psoriasis to arthritis. So there's people who have different needs, and that's where I think specific dosing and specific needs is what compounding essentially is all about.
Great. Let's close with talking about Hims for a moment. This podcast is called Hims House, so I want to get in a little bit about Hims and Hers.
Sure.
You guys are not affiliated with Hims, but of course executives at really one of the biggest compounding pharmacies in the industry. From your perspective, what role has Hims played in compounding broadly? And then if we could focus a little bit on Andrew Dudum as well and what he's built, controversial figure, but is the figurehead of probably the company that is the face of compounding in many ways. And so curious about what you guys from an outside perspective think of Hims and then Andrew specifically.
Sure. I'll let you go in. But I actually have a lot of friends who work at Hims. I mean, the industry is small enough that, I interact with them very frequently, but I think from a global standpoint, I'll let Josh kind of dive into that.
Sure. I don't know if they were surprised you have a lot of friends or you have a lot of friends at Hims. I think what Hims does really well, compounding and promoting compounded medication on its own is great. And that goes to a lot of what we talked about. But I think they do a really good job from a marketing perspective around the stigma around what this compounded medication is solving. So instead of worrying about the problem, I think they do a really good job educating consumers about a solution. So if you have ED, that is a problem. They're marketing to you with compounded medication, the solution to your problem. If you have weight loss, it's the same thing. And I think that's where they've done really, really well, step after step, including testosterone. For a male, I don't think it'd be, not saying I do or don't struggle with my testosterone, but I'm saying I think it'd be tough for me to go to a doctor. It's very embarrassing. There's a lot of these symptoms that I think they do a really good job taking care of and making you feel heard, making you feel part of a group of people that are going through the exact same thing. So that's where the lab results from home, the testosterone shipped to you from home in discrete packaging, I think they do a really, really good job making people feel seen. And they're doing that through compounded medication. I think both of those things tie together.
I think Josh said it extremely well. It's a lot of things that were taboo and people would not even bring up to their doctors if you talk to them face to face, have now a platform or a mainstream option to really bring these things to light and not only just talk about it, then offer, like Josh said, the solution for that problem that you bring there. It really is a great model. And I think it's a really big step forward in healthcare.
Yeah, there was a stigma around compounded medication and a stigma around the problems these patients are facing. They've kind of eliminated both, which I think is phenomenal for the industry. It's phenomenal if you're a patient searching for solutions. That's my take on what they're doing. And I think it's great.
It's so interesting to me. If you ask like the head of Nike, what do you think about Adidas or On or Hoka or any of these? I don't know that like the answer is going to be as complimentary as it has consistently been from others in the industry, whether it's Hone or Superpower or you guys at Olympia or Sean Norian at Empower. And maybe you're just saying that because we're on Hims House here, but it sounds genuine. And I do think Hims has transformed the industry in some fundamental ways.
And I think the difference with healthcare is we all have the exact same mission. Whether we get there and you quote unquote compete with one another, the end goal is healthcare. I think selling a shoe and trying to be the best shoe, like you don't want someone to wear the other shoe. But if someone takes medication that's helping them, that's not ours, we're in that same industry. If someone's doing a great job, that speaks to what we do. So for us, I think it's easy to be complementary. That's where we've really embraced our partner pharmacy A's. There's a lot of A's that make sterile medication, and they make the exact same sterile medication we do. But we open our doors and say, hey, what can we do to partner? What can we do to make sure you have more capacity and you don't have to make this, and we'll make it and sell it to you at a cost that's really affordable and that is worth you not making it in your own house. So like for us, we look at the industry as just one big family, transparently, and the good players really work well together.
And you know, like even in our conversations, I think compounding is 2%. There's 98% that's still out there. And so I don't want to fight with HIMSS or all these other people for the 2%. If we're all doing it, we're all doing it right. We want to make that 2% 50% or 100%. And you know, Josh made a great point. If it's a good product that solves problems, that's not a secret. That's part of our mission, is to make people healthier, to provide these solutions. And if they get it from HIMSS or they get it from, you know, another company.
And analogy that I consider, I don't know if you guys watch football, the NFL is a very copycat league. You have one play that works for one team, another team is going to copy it. So for us in this industry, if someone's doing something great, they're not turning their back against their other competitors and not letting them know what it is. We share information, we share formulas. Like if someone makes something great, let's try to see how many people we can get to take that great product. And that's kind of how we feel in our industry. And that's what I love about this industry as well.
That's an awesome note to end on. Mark, Mikhael, Josh, Fritzler, thank you so much for being a part of HIMSS House.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Take care.